I'd like to call the meeting to order. We have reduced time today because of the votes that just took place, but pursuant to Standing Order 81-4, main estimates for 2012-2013, vote 15 under the Privy Council referred to the committee Tuesday, February 28, 2012. We have Monsieur Meron from Elections Canada with us today. We are going to try and go about 40 minutes for each panel. I'm sorry I'm reducing your time, but we're going to, so about 20 after we'll finish up this half, and then we'll have the clerk and the speaker in for the second half. Monsieur Meron, you have some opening statements. Please go ahead, introduce the people who are with you, and then we'll get to questions after that. We'll try and see how concise we can be today.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. With me today on my right is Mrs. Hélène Bélanger, who is the Chief Financial Officer at Elections Canada. On my left, Mr. Belaina de Geffe, who is the Deputy Chief Electoral Affairs, responsible for planning, policy, and public affairs. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je comparais aujourd'hui.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm here today to discuss the 2012-2013 main estimates for my office, including Election Canada's priorities for this fiscal year. Following 7 years of minority governments, my office is now working in a new operating environment. The election of a majority government means a fixed election date, with the next general election in October 2015. The agency now has a window of opportunity to pursue longer-term efforts to modernize the electoral process before returning to full election readiness. My office is also focused on some significant external and internal initiatives, such as supporting the readjustment of electoral boundaries, preparing for a forthcoming move to Gatineau, and managing the impact of fiscal restraint.
Avant de vous parler de nos priorités, je vous présenterai.
Before I explain our priorities, I would like to provide an overview of the budget authorities under which my office operates, as well as an account of Election Canada's response to fiscal restraint. The Office of the Chief Electoral Officer is funded by and operates under two separate budget authorities. The first is an annual parliamentary appropriation, which only covers the salaries for indeterminate positions. For these main estimates, our appropriation is $29.5 million, representing the salaries of approximately 360 full-time equivalent employees. It is this component that the committee is considering for approval today. The second is a statutory authority that draws directly from the Consolidated Revenue Fund. This authority funds all other Elections Canada expenditures. Our projected statutory draw for 2012-2013 is $114.7 million.
Letter to this committee, Elections Canada is reducing its annual operating budget by 8%, starting this fiscal year. In making these reductions, we did not include expenditure that fall outside our annual operating budget, namely those related to transfer payments required by statute, the delivery of electoral events, the readjustment of electoral boundaries, and the relocation of Elections Canada's office to Gatineau in 2013. This left an operating budget of $94.1 million, which we then reduced by $7.5 million, or 8%. Elections Canada is applying these reductions in 4 ways. First, we have reduced the budget available to programs for time-limited initiative. This budget, only available to program through a rigorous annual allocation process, is used to renew program infrastructure and carry out initiatives aimed at improving election administration. Second, programs have been required through a variety of measures to achieve efficiencies and absorb maintenance costs for recently delivered information technology applications. Third, we are extending the time frame for the development and delivery of various programs and corporate initiatives. For example, we're now planning to conduct a pilot project on Internet voting during the next general election in 2015 rather than in a by-election in 2013. Finally, the agency is reviewing all programs to ensure that resources are focused on the highest priorities linked to its mandates. We will await instruction from Treasury Board about how to fully reflect information on my office budget reduction in subsequent estimates report. While our proposed reductions apply to statutory expenses, Elections Canada annual appropriation, which is the one that you'll be voting on today, is nevertheless affected by the 2010 budget restraint measures, which require departments to absorb the costs associated with increases in collective agreements. These measures have put pressure on my office's ability within its annual appropriation. This situation has been exacerbated by a declining attrition rate. To the extent that departments are required to continue absorbing these costs in future years, I expect that my office will not be able to manage its salary expenses within its annual appropriation by 2014. To address this critical situation and in an effort to minimize the impact on the services we provide to electors and political entities, Elections Canada is completing a zero-based budgeting exercise. This exercise will allow my office to review its operations, to identify additional cost savings, prioritize investment, and reallocate financial and human resources. Elections Canada may nonetheless need to apply the Workforce Adjustment Directive to deal with the projected pressure on its annual appropriation, and will be in a better position in the fall to provide more details in that regard. I would now like to briefly describe our priorities for this fiscal year. The 2012-13 reports on plans and priorities indicates that Elections Canada would focus on two overarching priorities. These are the electoral boundaries readjustment process and improvements for electors and political entities. In light of recent events, we have readjusted our plans to place a major priority on strengthening measures aiming to improve compliance with the procedure and standards applicable on voting days. Our intention is threefold. First, to review the voter registration and voting process based on what transpired in the Etobicoke Centre. Second, to assess the effectiveness of existing checks and balances. And third, to engage key stakeholders in implementing solutions for the 2015 election. We believe this is critical regardless of the outcome of the appeal. J'aimerais maintenant parler de la révision des limites.
Let me now turn to the electoral boundaries readjustment. The agency will continue enabling the 10 independent commissions to conduct their work in 2012-2013 by providing administrative and technical support. We will also begin the preparatory work required to implement the new boundaries. As required by the legislation, Elections Canada must be ready to hold a general election using the new boundaries within 7 months after the conclusion of the readjustment process anticipated for the fall of 2013. At this time, the process is on track. Commissions are planning to complete their proposals this spring and summer and to conduct public hearings by the fall. I will continue to update parliamentarians throughout the process. A second priority for 2012-13 is improvements in services for electors and political entities. With a fixed election date of October 2015, my office has a 2-year window of opportunity to focus on selected improvements before returning to election readiness in 2014-15. For the 2015 election, our focus is on improving convenience and accessibility for Canadians, while ensuring that the integrity of the electoral process is protected. We are considering options for expanding the use of the voter information card as proof of identity and address, as well as expanding our online voter registration service, which was launched this April. In addition, we will look at options for establishing new locations to vote by special ballot, such as university and college campuses, and community centres for electors with disabilities. We are also planning to conduct pilot projects to test internet voting, as well as more efficient voting processes at ordinary and in advance polls. These pilot projects require parliamentary approval. I will keep parliamentarians updated through the House and Senate committees responsible for electoral matters prior to seeking approval. I will also continue to engage key stakeholders, including the Advisory Committee of Political Parties, as these initiatives evolve. In the case of political entities, we are pursuing our initiatives to reduce the administrative burden and improve our services to them. These initiatives include e-filing capabilities, more efficient maintenance of registration information, and improved access to demographic data by polling division. As Election Canada implements measures related to fiscal restraint, it remains committed to offering career development opportunities and improving succession planning. Lastly, we are preparing to move to a new facility in Gatineau and consolidate all Elections Canada offices in one location. This move is scheduled to occur in summer 2013. In concluding, I would like to touch on a few other matters of interest to the committee. First, I would like to thank the committee for its comprehensive consideration of my 2010 recommendations for legislative change. I look forward to the government's response to your report. Second, I plan to invite the committee to Elections Canada's headquarters in the fall. This will be an occasion to provide you with an update on our key initiatives.
Previous appearance before this committee regarding the so-called robocalls affair. During my appearance on March 29, I informed the committee that we had at that time received over 800 complaints regarding alleged fraudulent calls made during the 41st general election. The total as of this week is now over 1,100 complaints. However, the number of new complaints is declining considerably. I also indicated during my last appearance that I would provide you with a report before the end of the fiscal year, and I would like to speak briefly to the nature and scope of that report, which is not dependent on the progress or outcome of the investigation. The purpose of this report will be to suggest improvement to the Canada Elections Act in order to deal with a number of issues relating to new technologies and social media, as well as to how political entities communicate with electors during a general election. Among other things, it will address issues such as voter contacts, either through automated or live calls, and whether, and if so, to what extent these communications need to be regulated. As for the investigation, I can confirm that it is ongoing and remains a priority for the Commissioner. However, until the investigation has been concluded, I'm not in a position to provide additional information to the committee. I remain mindful that the committee had previously asked that I appear in June to provide a follow-up on this matter. While I am available if the committee so wishes, I believe an appearance at this time would be premature, as it is unlikely that I will be in a position to provide any additional information on the investigation. On this, Mr. Chair, I would like to thank you, and my colleagues and I would be pleased to answer your questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your statement. We will go to questioning. Please get your name on the list if you wish to be there. I think, Mr. Reid, you are first. We'll go 5-minute rounds and then 4-minute rounds in the others, and see if we can do it all in half an hour. Mr. Reid, go ahead.
Thank you. Just to be clear, you said you'd report before the end of this fiscal year. You mean then you'll report to us by March 31st, 2013?
Yes.
Okay. I'd wanted to inquire about something that came up in the news on Saturday. This relates to your expenditures. Some documents received via the Access to Information Act indicate that Elections Canada has been engaged through an intermediary in doing telephone contact with voters for the purpose of boosting voter turnout. Specifically, $50,000 was given to the Assembly of First Nations during the last election to set up call centres, reading from prepared scripts that Elections Canada had provided. And this was designed to boost Aboriginal voter participation. So let me ask, first of all, would you be able to make available to us copies of those scripts so we can find out what exactly was said to the voters?
Sure, no problem.
I assume as well, normally when a government department or an agency gives money to a private organization, there's a requirement that they submit a report at the end of that to show how they fulfilled the agreement. I'd be grateful if you could submit that to us as well, so we can take a look at how this contract was fulfilled. Can you do that for us?
Sure.
Okay. Now, the next question I have is this the only voter contact that Elections Canada farmed out to another organization in the last election, or indeed in the last several elections? This is part of a 5-year program you've had set up since 2005, or 7 years, I guess. Are there any other cases where other organizations were used to provide such contact?
Maybe just as a point of clarification, these were not voter contacts. This was a contract to reach out to band leaders across the country and inform them about the opportunities to vote for members of their community.
So am I correct then that this may have been misreported? This is what's in the article may not reflect the facts? Is that what you're saying?
Certainly it was not voter contact. It was contact with band leaders, and we used the AFN to reach out to band leaders to facilitate awareness about the voting options and process in their community.
So the scripts that are scripts that the AFN would use to talk to the band leaders as opposed to speaking to individual voters. Is that correct?
Yes.
I see. All right. Well, I guess we'll have a chance to look at that in more detail. I asked a question about any other such contracts with any other organizations. Is this one with the AFN the only one of this type, or is there anything else?
There was a similar contract with the AFN in the previous election.
Right.
I'm not aware if there were any others. Would you know?
We have also worked with the National Association of Friendship Centers, again, to provide them for information that they can supply to the members that they serve, but that's more of an information program, again, related to indicating where and how to vote.
That's also an Aboriginal initiative. Were there initiatives directed at any groups other than Aboriginals?
Not that I'm aware of.
All right. And I guess I would ask the same question about submitting us the scripts, the other material for the friendship centers as well. If you could do that, we'd be most appreciative.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think that's everything I've got. It is, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
You have a minute if someone wants it. Mr. Kerr, for a minute.
Very much. I had a number of questions I was going to try to get in later, but your reference to pilot projects and you're changing the one from 2013 2015. Of course, all the pilot projects you'll bring back here for approval. I understand that. Just expand on that. Why the focus on 2015? Mm-hmm. I might have missed something in your explanation.
Well, one aspect of it is that we've just came out of a general election, which has an impact on projects that were on the drawing board. The other thing is that in light of financial constraint, we need to spread out our expenditures in those areas. So again, we think that 2015 is more reasonable. And again, these pilot projects, there's two that we're looking at right now. There may be others, but there's two that will definitely bring to the attention of this committee. One is on i-voting. Mm-hmm. The other one is on voting operations. At the polls, how we organize work, what are the procedures in place, and how can we become more efficient, provide better service to electors, be more consistent in the application of the legislation, and again, generally provide more trustworthy result in all the process.
Thank you.
5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Méran, for being here. As a result of an NDP motion several months ago in the House to address some of the concerns in your report with regards to authority for your office to review political parties, to oversee them, and to deal with voter contact and some of the voter suppression issues that we saw in the last election, Parliament passed a resolution calling on the government to address those issues within 6 months. Have your offices been contacted by the government for any input as to the types of remedies, types of legislation or regulations that could be put in place to address some of those issues?
Not to my knowledge at this point.
Would you expect that you would be consulted before legislation would be coming forward of that nature?
I would certainly like to.
Okay. Mr. Méran, with regards to the budgetary, the estimates, the main estimates have a figure with regards to regulation of electoral activities of some $46 million. But in your report, your figure for the same item is $38 million. Could you explain the discrepancy between those two figures of about $8 million?
Which report are you referring to?
I'm sorry, I'm talking about, it came out of your office, it's Table 2, the planning summary table. And this is the projected spending for 2012-13. Your figure is $38,675,000. The government figure is in excess of $46 million in the main estimates.
Oh, okay. You're talking about regulation of electoral activities?
Regulation of
That's a reflection of the reduction in the vote subsidy, which was not included in the main estimate at the time because the act was not in force. It's now reflected in the RPP, and it shows a reduction of $7.9 million or so as a result of the reduction in the vote subsidies.
So based on that projection, the actual expected expenditure this year will be that less, what's in the main estimate will be less by $7.9 million.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And can you give me a quick overview of where those cuts occurred in your office?
Mm-hmm. There is, it occurs across the organization. There's a fair amount that's coming from IT and our IT infrastructure and IT efficiencies that we've achieved there. There's about $2 million in that area where we've reduced our expenditures. The remainder of the amount comes from various efficiencies across programs, as well as a reduction in services. For example, in international affairs, we've stopped providing bilateral technical assistance to various countries. In the field of political entities, we will no longer offering a training session across the country. That will be offset by some tutorial online, but we will not be in a position to continue offering service face-to-face. So it's these types of efficiencies, or again, we've tried to keep the reduction of services to a strict bare minimum.
Given the outcome of the decision in Etobicoke, certainly one of the conclusions I came to was we don't have enough staff when we run the election, and we don't have staff well enough trained to deal with the particular issue that the court found they were confronted with on May 2nd. How are we going to be able to cope with that if we're reducing budgetary items?
Okay. As indicated earlier, the budget and the reduction don't apply to election delivery. So the budget for election delivery are not affected by the proposed cuts.
But you're not augmenting your budget in that regard either, are you?
At this point, no, but it's something that we have to look at. Most of the costs will be in relation to the delivery of the election. As I said, we need to do a rigorous analysis of how we can improve process and procedure at voting place, and there will be a cost to that.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Garneau, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Chair, I'm interested in identifying where the funding or the costs associated with running the Commissioner of Elections Canada's costs are identified as a program activity. Under what do they come?
They would come under program activity number 2, regulation of electoral activities.
Thank you. And given the fact that, as you pointed out, that there are a large number of investigations that potentially will occur, and you mentioned that the number had gone from 800 to 1,100, it seems to me that that budget or those costs could be increasing costs in ways that you may not know about right now. Mm-hmm. What happens when the Commissioner, we're told, gets whatever funding he requires mm-hmm. to do his investigations? What happens when all that money is used up? Or
mm-hmm. Okay. There's always two distinctions to make. As part of the operating budget, the ongoing budget of the organization, there's a budgetary envelope of around $2 million, slightly less, for the Commissioner's office. That keeps the core team in place there. In addition to that, the Commissioner may need, for any particular investigation, depending on the circumstances, may need additional funds, and that's funded through the statutory authority outside of the ongoing budget. So if he needs a few more investigators, that will be paid out of the statutory authority and will be shown here in the subs, in supplementary
So that would appear in supplementary estimates. Okay, thank you. Vous avez mentionné que le budget de fonctionnement de 4...
You mentioned that the operating budget of $94.1 million was reduced by $7.5 million, and that you had found 4 ways of reducing your expenditures for about 8%. You mentioned, secondly, you talked about efficiency gains. The government often says that most of the cutbacks that are being made in the government are related to efficiency. So I would like to have your calculation based on the 4 methods that you used to reduce your cuts by 8%. What percentage would be related to gains in efficiency? I would say it would be about 2.5 million of the 7 that are proposed, and the vast majority of these reductions would be in terms of IT. We've made significant efforts to better use our resources, and for all the new initiatives, the costs involved in them have to be absorbed by other cost reductions elsewhere in the system. Thank you very much. You mentioned as well that you face certain challenges because of the 2010 budget constraints measures with respect to collective agreements and the decreasing attrition rates. This was a problem. So you're facing a challenge. Are you confident that you can meet up to this challenge, or will you have to come back to the government and say, look, this isn't working? Well, at this point in time, and we have to refine the figures because there have been a lot of changes in recent months, but we think that we will be in a deficit situation starting in 2014. So we've got 1 year to see. So we're going to try to count on attrition as much as possible, so not replace people who leave, but attrition doesn't always work out in the least essential positions. So that may not be enough. That's why we started the zero-based budgeting exercise to see how we can align our resources and make sure that the essential programs of Elections Canada are not at risk. The election delivery, the regulation of electoral activities, and so on. We have to make sure that these programs remain viable.
That you do have initiatives to try to boost, trying to create a greater awareness and encourage Canadians to vote. Would you say that there are measures that have been successful in terms of your expenditures?
Mm-hmm. The main program that comes to mind is Student Vote, where we did carry an evaluation. All participants, students, professors, parents, and students found it extremely useful, and they all indicated yes, that it increased their knowledge of our democracy and increased their had an effect on their intention to vote in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Kerr, 4-minute rounds, please.
Mr. Chair and Mr. Mayor, you mentioned some additional costs and supplements expected. Do you anticipate more? Is there expect a fair amount of pressure going through that process this year?
Well, the one thing that would certainly appear in supplementary estimates as we go throughout the year is if there is a by-election call. That would be an additional pressure that would have to be addressed to supplementary estimates.
So most that's beyond your control.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Exactly. That's why we don't provide for them in the budget, the opening budget.
Well, we hope there aren't a lot of by-elections. We'll leave that be. You mentioned the cost to settle the independent commissions, $6.9 million. Would you anticipate that being the full cost of the boundary? Maybe I missed your comment on that.
The full cost of the boundary, which spans over more than 2 years, is $12.2 million. Okay. 6.9 this year. and about $4 million the year after, and we spent a bit in the previous year to get ready for launching the commission this year.
So that it's a multi-year budget
Yes.
impact, okay? How do you anticipate that comparing with your previous experience with boundary redistribution, cost-wise?
Given it happens only every 10 years, I won't talk of my experience, but it's basically the same amount in constant dollar. So we've been very careful to be rigorous here. Of course, facilities costs have increased significantly since 2004 across the country. Well, we were able to absorb that through reduction in other expenditure items.
Yeah. I shouldn't have been suggesting you were actually there, but I'm sure you studied it pretty carefully. Appreciate that.
Yes.
Could I ask about your reallocation to Gatineau? I know that's a fairly expensive process. Can you give us a bit of detail on that as to what it encompasses or what you expect in that regard?
Okay. Again, this is a multi-year project. The total cost, as per Class D estimates from Public Works, is around $19 million. 12 million of those costs will be incurred this year. The reason why, again, it's been added to our budget is, first of all, the decision to build the building was made prior to budgetary restraint. In addition, our main office is being decommissioned as of 2014, I believe. And the third thing is that we're now spread in 7 offices around Ottawa, and that's not really efficient. So again, going to Gatineau will leave only 2 offices, 2 buildings, 1 main office where all workers will be located, and a warehouse here in Ottawa.
Okay, so is that it? Just one further on that. So the decommissioning is the main building, but you actually have to shut down or get out of other buildings as well. A lot of moves.
Our office has long gone its past due date, I can assure you.
Okay. That's good. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
About 30 seconds, Mr. Lukiski, if you want to fill it.
Quick comment, Monsieur Meron, from you, if I could. Right now, we're talking about the permanent voters list, and there's always been a bit of a controversy. As you know, obviously, on T4 slips, or I should say on income tax returns, right now it's a voluntary mechanism where if people want their names added to the permanent voters list, they can voluntarily check off a box. Would you like to see that strengthened? I mean, in other words, we'd like to see that mandatory, and would that help?
I guess the short answer is it would help, because currently there's about 82–83% of taxpayers that tick that box. That leaves aside 15 to 17% of them. There's other sources, but this is our main source. I think whether it should be mandatory, that's an issue that requires probably further thoughts. But again, as you know, there are other regimes in the world where there is mandatory registration. Yes.
Madam Turmel, for 4 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation, but I need some information on one point in particular. The budget for is on the budget for the next election. How much extra money do you think you'll need to avoid a situation such as the one that happened in the Etobicoke Centre? There were cutbacks in training that will be linked to the upcoming elections. Cutback in changes for training for the political parties. So how are you going to deal with that? Or do you need an extra percentage budget for the upcoming election? We haven't set the budget for the upcoming election. There are too many variables that can happen. One of the priorities, as I said, which has emerged more recently as a result of what happened in Etobicoke Centre, well, we have to review our processes as to the recruitment, the training, and the procedures in the polling stations, and the procedures that are applied in the polling stations. That's what we're going to be doing in the months ahead. If the committee accepts our invitation to come in September, I'll be able to give you more information. And one of the things we're going to have to do, and what more in-depth analysis may reveal, is that we have to find a way of finding a quality control procedure in real time. An election happens over one day. It involves 230,000 people, and you can't redo it. It's often the first day they work and the only day on which they work. So we have to find a way of doing this. And it could be expensive to have quality control procedures in place for voting day. And that's what we're going to be thinking about. We're going to look into that and make proposals. You spoke about students and their lack of interest in voting. But what's being done? Because we know that there are many students in universities who, particularly in the last election, who were writing exams during the election period. So I have two questions here. What is going to be done to ensure that it's easier for students to vote? And my second question, you've got 360 permanent staff in your area. You aren't talking about contract and casual workers. Is there a budget, and how much do you have? And the second question, I would say approximately 140 term and casual workers. These employees are paid from the statutory appropriations. It's not voted by Parliament. So they're not affected by the cutbacks? Some of them may have been affected by the 7.9 million reduction. And as to young people, well, there are all sorts of initiatives that we have underway to try to improve the information that's given to them. One of the things we're thinking about for the 2015 election is to have special ballots on university and college campuses throughout the country. This will be one of the major initiatives to improve their access to voting. Is my time up? I would like to have information about casual and contract workers, whether they've been affected or if it was just the permanent workers.
We've got very little time left. Mr. Williamson, you have one questioned and asked and answered in a minute. Mr. Camartin will do the same thing for you, or someone else here. Go ahead, Mr.
On page 9, good day. It's good to see you again, Mr. Méran. Look, I salute you for the deficit reduction measures you've taken. You referred to, quote, we are considering options for expanding the use of the voter information card as proof of identity and address. What is that?
Mm-hmm. We did that in the last general election in senior homes, for example, as well as on reserve across the country. And we also introduce it for students residing on campus. In all cases, these are defined electors living in a limited, very restricted area. It was very successful for seniors who often have issues establishing their identity and address. So what we allow there is the VIC in combination with another piece of ID would meet the requirement of the legislation. Many seniors don't drive anymore. They don't have a driver's license. And often, in many cases, they don't have much documents left with them. They're maintained by family members.
Okay. So you're not proposing any kind of like national ID card then?
No, not national. No, that's another discussion.
I want to make sure.
But that's not part of what's being proposed here.
I want to make sure I close that one right away.
All right. Madame La Tendresse, for a minute, a question asked and answered, if we could, please.
Merci, je vais être rapide pour
Be quick. To continue about the participation of students in elections. I know there were some pilot projects in the 2011 election about polling stations on campuses. Was there a greater turnout of younger voters there? That was not at the federal level. There were some provinces that tried this out on a pilot project basis, but that didn't happen federally. Okay. And have you got any statistics from the provinces as to whether voter turnout was better? I don't have any at the tip of my fingers. I know that most of the colleagues, when I meet with my colleagues in July, we'll be talking about this. I know that most of my colleagues expect to continue with this experiment and broaden it for next time.
Sorry, but we've run out of time. Mr. Menon, thank you for your invitation to come visit you this fall. That will still be easy while you're in downtown Ottawa. I see you're moving to Gatineau so that I'll get more exercise when we walk over to see Elections Canada in 2014.
After.
Well, thank you for coming today, and thank you for helping us with the estimates.
You will discuss the question of my future appearance in June?
The committee will have that discussion, yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
All right, we will suspend just for a couple of minutes and put our next panel in place. We will call the meeting back to order. Again, we're still looking at estimates, and we have a new panel of guests with us. We have Speaker Scheer with us today. Great to have you here, sir. Madam O'Brien, always good to have you, and Mark Waters. I think is this your first appearance at our committee on estimates?
I've been before, sir, for supplementaries.
Well, excellent. Well, it's great to have you back, and I see a lot of help in the benches behind you should you need it too, but I know neither of you, of course, will ever need it. Let's go ahead. You have an opening statement, Mr. Speaker Scheer, and we'll then get to questions by members.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It's a pleasure to be here today. C'est avec plaisir que je comparerai devant vous de nouveau.
It's a pleasure to be here before you again, this time to present the House of Commons main estimates for 2012-2013.
$45,935,033 for this fiscal year. This represents an increase of approximately $4.2 million, or 0.97% over fiscal year 2011-2012. As you would expect, all items included in the main estimates were presented to and approved by the Board of Internal Economy on November 28, 2011. The House Administration conducted a stringent review of requirements in preparation for these main estimates prior to presenting them to the Board. Vous avez reçu à titre d'information un document.
For reference purposes, you have received a document outlining the year-over-year changes from fiscal year 2011 to 12 to fiscal year 2012 to 13. I will now go over the increases, nil increases, and reductions with you according to three major themes: budgets for members, House officers and presiding officers, House administration, and employee benefit plans.
Decisions with regard to the budgets for members, House officers, and presiding officers. As you may recall, last fiscal year, the Board decided to continue adopting the restraints introduced in the 2010 federal budget. As such, members' office budgets, including supplements, as well as House officers and presiding officers' budgets, remained at the 2009-2010 levels. Pour l'exercice en cours, certains éléments des budgets des députés, des agents supérieurs de la Chambre et des présidents.
The current fiscal year budgets of members, House officers, and presiding officers have seen increases in some areas and decreases in others.
Estimates for 2012, 2013, and subsequent years to reflect contributions to the members of Parliament retiring allowances and retirement compensation arrangements accounts. The MPRA and the RCA are non-discretionary statutory accounts. The MPRA account is established to provide pension benefits to eligible members of Parliament who contributed to the plan. The RCA account is established to provide for benefits with respect to pension credits accrued by members of Parliament that are not payable out of the MPRA account. The cost of the House of Commons for contributions to members' pensions plans is determined and managed by Treasury Board based on actuarial calculations. As per the Treasury Board policy with respect to members' pension accounts, regular actuarial reviews are conducted by the Chief Actuary of the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions in order to assess these accounts and adjust contributions as needed. Some of the factors taken into account during the reviews include increases to the salaries of members, the likelihood of members retiring, the rate of return on the retirement accounts, the number of pensioners, and longevity improvement factors. Le Bureau a aussi approuvé un financement.
Next, the Board approved permanent funding of $1.3 million via the main estimates for 2012-2013 and subsequent years to offset rising travel costs under the travel points system. As you know, the travel points system ensures that all members have access to the same travel resources regardless of their constituency's location. Each fiscal year, members are allocated 64 travel points. Transportation costs for these trips are charged to a House Administration central budget.
Is a non-discretionary statutory expense as per the Parliament of Canada Act, which states in 63 paragraph 1, for each session of Parliament there shall be allowed to every member of each House of Parliament such actual moving, transportation, travel, and telecommunication expenses as that House may by order prescribe. Previous budgets were not sufficient to cover rising travel costs. In the past, a portion of the in-year operating surplus from other budgets within the statutory funding envelope was used to offset the shortfalls related to the travel points system. These surplus funds are no longer available. The cost of travel, and in particular air travel, has increased in recent years due to a number of factors beyond our control. The additional funding for the travel points system addresses these increased costs. Next, a budget increase of $1.2 million was approved to cover additional requirements for other personnel costs for members and House officers' employees. Other personnel costs are a non-discretionary expenditure for which the employer is responsible. They include such elements as lump sum vacation pay, severance pay, termination benefits, and maternity and parental leave. In this case, the budget increase is required because of an increase in payments related to the number of maternity and parental leave claims, termination and severance pay, as well as lump sum vacation pay. The board also approved additional permanent funding of $828,000 to align the funding for members' office budgets and members' travel status expenses account allocations with the budget allocations that are provided to members. Over the years, members' office budgets and members' travel status expenses account allocations did not match the funding requested through the main estimates because allocations were higher than the funding. Recent budgetary restraint measures have left these budgets virtually unchanged since 2009-2010, which has resulted in budgetary constraints. Moving on to the revised elector supplement allocations, the board approved permanent funding of $452,000 via the main estimates for 2012-2013 and subsequent years. The revised elector supplement allocations based on the final number of electors published by the Chief Electoral Officer. Members who represent densely populated constituencies receive an elector supplement that remains in effect for the duration of a parliament. This graduated supplement is added to the basic budget when there are at least 70,000 electors on the final list of electors for the constituency. Selon la liste électorale officielle,
the official electoral list published following the May 2011 general election shows that 60 constituencies are eligible for either a new or a revised elector supplement. Now I would like to go over a few reductions to the budgets for members, House officers, and presiding officers.
And salaries for House officers due to the reduction in the number of recognized parties following the general election on May 2, 2011. This amount also includes an adjustment to the annual motor vehicle allowance for the Speaker and the Leader of the Official Opposition in accordance with the Parliament of Canada Act. House officers' budgets were also reduced by $3.8 million. The budgets were established for all parties based on the results of the May 2, 2011 general election in accordance with the formula approved by the Board of Internal Economy. Next, I would like to go over a few items relating to the House administration. In February 2011, the board approved temporary funding of $786,000 for fiscal year 2011-2012 and nearly $4 million for fiscal year 2012-2013 for the 127th General Assembly of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, IPU, which will be held in Quebec City in October 2012. That amounts to a total of nearly $4.8 million in funding, which is shared under the usual 30-70 cost-sharing arrangement between the Senate and the House of Commons. The board also approved the carryover of any remaining funds from fiscal year 2011-2012 to fiscal year 2012-2013. The IPU General Assembly is the main statutory body that expresses the views of the Inter-Parliamentary Union on parliamentary and political issues. It meets twice a year in the spring and fall and brings together more than 1,500 parliamentary delegates to study international problems and recommend actions. Cela est tout un honneur d'être le pays hôte.
It is quite the honor to be a host nation, as the political, economic, and cultural benefits of hosting an IPU assembly are significant for Canada. It will serve to underscore our long-standing commitment to the principles of parliamentary democracy, help reinforce bilateral and multilateral partnerships, and showcase Canada's rich cultural heritage and diversity. The Parliament of Canada has previously hosted IPU assemblies in 1925, 1965, and 1985.
The board had approved permanent salary funding of $18,000 required for the House of Commons PAGE program for fiscal year 2010, 2011, and subsequent years. The increase in the annual allocation for PAGES is needed to ensure that the program remains competitive and capable of attracting the most qualified candidates from all regions of the country. The annual PAGE compensation will increase by $468 from $12,890 to $13,358, an amount equal to the average increases in tuition at the University of Ottawa and Carleton University. A review of this provision will take place at the end of fiscal year 2015-2016. For 2010, 2011, and 2011-2012, the decision was made to fund the increase internally. Going back to December 2010 again, the board had approved temporary funding of $98,000 for fiscal year 2011-2012 to implement the Occupational Health and Safety, Workplace Safety and Insurance Claims Management System, as well as permanent funding of $45,000 for fiscal year 2012-2013 and subsequent years for the support and maintenance of the system. During 2011-2012, the project team completed the request for proposal process and retained the required resources to develop the system with a temporary funding of $53,000. La mise en œuvre du système de gestion des réclamations.
The deployment of the Occupational Health and Safety, Workplace Safety, and Insurance Claims Management System will take place during the 2012-2013 fiscal year. The last item under the House Administration theme is the Members' Financial Portal. There is a reduction of $220,000 for fiscal year 2012-2013 for that item.
And the board approved temporary funding of $299,000 for fiscal year 2011-2012 to implement the first phase of the members' financial portal, as well as permanent funding of $79,000 for fiscal year 2012-2013 and subsequent years for one full-time equivalent position. The first phase of the members' financial portal was developed and launched to House Administration accounting officers in the fall of 2011. The pilot portion was initiated at the beginning of March 2012 with 10 participating members. The intention is to progressively deploy the first phase of the financial portal to all members in the coming months. The last item I'd like to discuss is employee benefit plans. EPBs are a non-discretionary statutory expenditure that applies to salary expenditures. For fiscal year 2012-2013, the Treasury Board Secretariat has adjusted the annual rate for employer EPB contributions from 18% to 17.6%. That amounts to a reduction of more than $1.1 million for the current fiscal year. EBP contributions include the following costs to the employer: public service superannuation plan, CPP and QPP, death benefits, employment insurance accounts. This concludes the overview of the House of Commons main estimates for 2012-2013. I believe that these main estimates aptly represent the House of Commons commitment to sound resource management. La greffière et moi-même sommes prêts à répondre à...
The clerk and I would be pleased to answer any questions that you may have.
Minute round to start. Mr. Lukiski.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Speaker, for being here. Now, I've got a question that is not covered in your opening remarks, and you may be somewhat reticent to comment on, but it's certainly been a favorite subject of this committee. So I'll ask your indulgence, and if you can give some feedback, I would appreciate it, and that deals with security services. It's been long felt by this committee that we should combine security forces between the Senate and the House of Commons, but that is not really an issue, unfortunately, that this committee can deal with. It's an issue that's dealt with by the Board of Internal Economy, of which you chair. So I won't ask you to comment on what kind of a study that you may be undertaking with regards to security services, but I will ask you that if there were combined security forces between Parliament and the Senate, what savings would you anticipate as a result of such a move? Have you got any kind of an approximate savings that you might be able to share with this committee on that hypothetical basis?
So you're asking a politician to answer a hypothetical.
Well, as a speaker, I thought you were beyond the politics of it all.
If I could just start by saying that, as I mentioned and as the clerk mentioned when I appeared before you for the supplementary estimates, there is an acknowledgement of the need to look at combining the security forces on the Hill. And to that end, the Board of Internal Economy has struck a security subcommittee, which will be any day now meeting with our Senate counterparts to start to develop that initiative to proceed down that route. In terms of proposed cost savings, I imagine that would be one of the first things that the Joint Committee would look at exactly how much that dollar amount would be. I don't know if Mark can put a dollar amount at this point, but it is anticipated, just knowing that there would be some reductions in redundancies and overlaps, that we anticipate that there could be some cost savings, and of course not just the cost savings, but a more efficient delivery of service. That when you're dealing with on the Hill, if you count everybody, 3 or 4 different policing entities from Wellington to inside, rationalizing some of that would not only ultimately the expectation would be more efficient delivery of service as well. So it's early days yet, so I wouldn't want to put too many specifics down, but the two committees do plan on meeting to start to work on this.
I can't remember, quite frankly, but could you, or do you have this at your fingertips, the cost for the services that we're currently paying? How much do we pay for security services on the House of Commons side, Parliament side? How much are the security costs on the Senate side? Do we have that with us?
We actually don't have that, Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Lukiski, but we can certainly make that available in a response to the written response at a later date.
I'd appreciate it, and I think this committee would also appreciate if you have any updates after the BOIE does its completes its study, when you're able to. I realize that information is confidential until you choose to release it, but I think the committee would certainly appreciate any updates of information that you could give us on that. With that, Chair, I know that my colleague, Mr. Williamson, has a number of questions, so if I may, I'll cede the rest of my time to Mr. Williamson.
Well, he has a minute and a half of your time to use.
All right. The flight passes. I'd like to talk about, Speaker and Clerk, if you could indulge me. I think I found as a new member, I was first of all quite surprised at some of the costs that I was incurring initially to get from Ottawa to home, and spoke to several people, and eventually was able to get into use the flight passes. I think it's a great initiative, and I'm curious to know how's the uptake been, and is this an issue you're trying to press on to other members as well? And if so, what kind of cost savings do you expect from that? Because I notice actually you have costs going up. And I suspect if members were to move to flight passes, costs would decline greatly.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can ask Mark to talk about the specific uptake at this point, but I can tell you that the board did spend a considerable amount of time as part of the strategic and operating review to identify savings in travel. Is that as of now?
Well, that's
it's anticipated. Ultimately, with full implementation of what the board has approved, and for your edification, we are moving towards a system where flight passes will be the norm. Right now, it's possible, but we're moving to a situation where to go from the constituency to Ottawa, that'll be the norm, and it's anticipated that will result in $5 million in savings.
Okay. Oh, am I done? All right.
Yeah, that was your minute and a half.
I realize that, yeah.
We'll get you back, I hope. Madame Gruguet?
Monsieur le Président. C'est très bien.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony here today. So the analysts prepared a briefing note for us, and if we look at page 1 in the table on the main estimates, there's a reference to estimate to 445,935,000, and in part 3 we see that there's a difference. So if you could give me more information about the difference, just to clarify what it is attributable to. So it's in this document here. That's one that we don't have. I think it's, I apologize. I think it's a document from the analysts for the information of committee members only. Okay. But it's the same information in your text. That was on page 2. Could you please explain this difference? In addition to what you say on page 2, can you give us some more information about that?
OK. Et est-ce que ça va être la même chose pour...
Will it be the same thing for subsequent years? I'm sorry. I'm not sure what you're referring to. In your presentation, your opening remarks, on page 2, sorry, I apologize. And you're referring to this difference, the increase of $4 million. What's that attributable to mainly? And will it recur every year? Well, I can tell you that the answer is no. It will not be repeated every year. And in fact, there will be reductions because of the strategic review that we've undertaken and that has been passed on to members. It's not reflected in the main estimates, but will be reflected in the supplementaries. and in the main estimates for the next 3 fiscal years. I could perhaps ask my colleague, Mr. Waters, to comment further. Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As the clerk said, through the supplementaries, we will be reducing the House's budget over the next few years, following a program that was supported by the board. So there will be reductions in the budget for the next 3 years. So the increases that put forward here will be canceled out by reductions of about $30 million in an annual basis by the 3rd year of the implementation of the program. So there is an increase of about $4 million for this year, but the strategic review will cancel that out for future years. And you're expecting $30 million over a year. By the end of the 3rd year, the reduction will be $30 million on an annual basis. We're giving ourselves 3 years to implement the program with increases that will gradually increase to $30 million by the 3rd year. Do I still have some time? There's a reference to the sound management of resources, which is an interesting idea, but the resources set out in the main estimates, well, will they allow the House administration to operate in an optimal fashion? Mr. Chairman, through you, I think the answer is yes. We are anticipating that with a strategic approach to the cuts, where we have to cut, well, we'll look at methods that may be out of date. We're going to look at using technology more strategically so that we can provide the same service, if not a better service, to members while not requiring further human resources. For example, the financial portal that was announced by the chairman, by the speaker in a recent press release, I think is an effort in this direction. And we are going to be establishing procedures of this type, and as a result, I'm quite confident that we will be able to maintain our strategic approach and meet our objectives while making the reductions required under the review. Thank you. Mr. Garneau, 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no questions for the Speaker or for the Clerk.
Thank you. 4 minutes. Can I ask, I'm curious, you anticipate these savings of $5 million, yet you've requested $1.3 million, if I'm reading that correctly, in additional funding. Why the up before you go down?
So there have been increased costs, and because not every member is on the travel point system up to this point, and I think as I mentioned in my speech previously, there had been surpluses used in other accounts to cover shortfalls, and we've gone away from that system partly because those surpluses aren't there anymore in those other accounts. And so it will go up to reflect the increased costs of the last little bit, and then start to go down as the flight passes are implemented.
Okay. And that is something you're planning to make mandatory, would you say, or how would you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And how about, what about for spouses as well? Because right now they're not currently available for spouses, as I understand.
Right. I'm not sure how the board had addressed that, but I think Mark knows a little bit more about it. So,
Mr. Chair, the thinking on the spouses was that they would not be allowed to use the flight passes because the flight passes have to be bought in segments of 10, booklets of 10. And members are responsible if those 10 segments would not be used. So in a way, to protect members from unnecessary expense, it was decided by the boy at the time that flight passes would only be applicable to members for regular travel, regular points back and forth between Ottawa and the constituency, because there was a high likelihood that the full 10 segments would be able to be used, whereas spousal travel is perhaps sometimes less predictable, and therefore probably best if a flight pass would not be purchased for the time being. We're still definitely quite open to studying that question further. We're only dipping our toe in the water of flight passes as we with this initiative. So should utilization prove that the full coupons, the full flight passes could be used, there'd be no reason why we wouldn't want to extend it to spouses. But for the time being, it was restricted to members.
Okay. Well, I would urge you to allow members to opt in if they choose. As you said, they're responsible for it, not the House of Commons, ultimately not taxpayers if they are not used. And it's one more avenue that could be used to save taxpayers additional money, because there are a lot of young members in the House whose families I think travel with them frequently. Here, I think so. It's one of them. So occasionally enough. So thank you. I have another question. Actually, it's geared towards the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if there was a case where monies were spent inappropriately, and that question was referred to the BOI, and the BOI agreed with that. If mail, for example, was improperly used, what's the sanction after that? Does it go back to the House of Commons? How does the BOI resolve that, or does it come to this committee?
In my short experience in the board, I've only been on it for about a year, the board looks at each situation and takes appropriate actions that it deems necessary in each case.
And for a new member, what might that be? Educate me, I guess.
In the cases that I'm aware of, either a combination of or specifically would be recouping the costs that was spent on the item that violated a regulation or a rule, and in other cases working with the party or the caucus officials to take further steps to ensure that further violations don't happen again.
Is there any public sanction?
No, things that come before the board are treated in a confidential manner.
Okay, thank you.
Madame La Tendresse.
Dans le fond, c'est ça. Pour revenir un petit peu.
To come back to an earlier question, in terms of the increase, you said there was an increase of $3 million through the main estimates. With respect to the retirement allowances, given the last election, was there an abnormally high number of retiring MPs? Yes. So this will be permanent because those people will be retired for X number of years. Yes. Did I understand this correctly? What we call the retirement compensation arrangements are people who don't have access to a pension but who do get some sort of lump sum compensation? Because when you don't have the minimum number of years, well, I'll leave it up to the Director of Finance to answer that question. He's more at home with the figures. Thank you, Madam Clerk and Mr. Speaker. Well, there are some limits that are set out by Revenue Canada in terms of a pension that can be paid to an individual. And when we exceed those limits, we create a separate pension plan. And it is the funding of those two accounts that make the total pension for the members. So there are certain things in the pension plan, and there are other functions in a supplementary distinct plan, and that's about because of Revenue Canada's rules about maximums. No other questions. Thank you. Mr. Mel? I have a question with respect to the employee benefits plan. You said that there would be a reduction from 18% to 17.6%. I'm wondering about that because all of the pension plans throughout the country are increasing. The death benefits, the EI account are in deficit in most places, and here there's a reduction. So I'm wondering, how did you come up with that figure? The figure comes from Treasury Board. It wasn't from the Board of Internal Economy. It was from the government, from the Treasury Board, because the House employees, their collective agreement mirror the government collective agreements. Take this up with the Treasury Board.
Oui. Voici, non.
Sure, 45 seconds now.
Just two quick ones, again, in that document that the analyst prepared. You have two figures that I'm not quite clear on. One is rentals of $12 million a year, and I assume that's rental property as opposed to rental equipment? Or is it a combination?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That pertains principally to leases. Rentals is not necessarily rental property, but any leases that we would have on equipment like photocopiers and those types of things.
So do we
office equipment?
Do we lease any properties as a house?
That's right. Yes.
We do?
We do.
Which one?
We don't. Well, we do, but those leases are administered through Public Works and Government Services Canada, so they wouldn't be reflected in the main estimates of the House. Those would be in the main estimates of that particular department. But these would be rental payments that are paid for members or for House administration for equipment, furniture, and those types of things.
Okay. And then Mr. Zimmer for 4 minutes, please.
Yeah, I'll take a lot less than that. But no, on the topic of reduction, I guess, in efficiencies, we've talked about security forces, but we also see a little white bus that goes around this place. And just wanted to know just the thoughts about combining the service and reducing redundancies, I guess this is the way I see it. And little things like that can have a cost. And certainly we don't want to promote just painting it green. It would be, what we'd be liking to do is just to combine the service, because often it drives around here empty. So just wanted to know the thoughts on that, and what would the cost be in reducing that service or making it more efficient?
I can say that as the board underwent its strategic and operating review to find these savings, the clerk's management team and the House of Commons administration really did look at everything, and there will be, at this point, there may not be specific plans that would go down to the detail of how many buses going where, but certainly overall objectives have been assigned to each different department with the hopes of finding some of these savings. So as it's fully implemented, I think you'll see some of these efficiencies found in every area around the House.
Certainly. And just to follow up with my colleague, Mr. Williamson, said about flight passes. My family flies very rarely, actually, but I mean, there's 6 of us, so it would definitely be well utilized by families like us. And I guess the thing that we would like to see is that instead of being prevented from using it, is to allow it as an option for us, especially with bigger families. I know you have the same kind of family, so but that would be nice. It would be a nice option for us anyway. So just make note of that.
No, I appreciate that, and as Mark said, we want to make sure that members are protected, that don't find themselves in a situation where at the end of the calendar year they thought they were going to use them and didn't, and so they're on the hook for the obligation for that. At this point, we're very interested. I think it's safe to say the board's very interested in them. In fact, some members of the board are quite keen on them, and we can monitor it as it goes and see how it works for members. How it works for them, how much money it's savings, and certainly if we're able to expand it to other family members in a way that protects individual members while still achieving the savings, I'm sure, I think it'd be safe to say we'd be open to it.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. We are pretty much at our time, so if we don't mind, we will thank our guests today and thank you for the great information you were able to share with us. And we will ask the committee a couple of questions. Shall vote 15 under the Privy Council carry? Yes. Shall the vote 5 under Parliament carry? Great. And shall the chair report these votes to the House? Thank you very much. That being done, we will adjourn for the day.